left, right.
Welcome to the final episode in season 3. This is episode 200, and tonight we are talking about World War III and what it could look like. First, we talk about a few current events. So it's mid-October 2022, and we are talking about what's going on in the current political climate, and then we get into World War III. So good luck, enjoy, see you on the other end. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Process go.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. After much delay, we're back. This is episode 200 of Sip Talk. My name is Justin DiGiulio, out of my basement in New Jersey, joined by James, the Boswell, philosopher, professional bartender, retired professional referee, and most exciting of all, accountant. James, how's it hanging down there in sunny, nighttimey South Carolina?
Yeah, it hasn't been sunny for like 2.5 hours, but
Yeah, my bad. Sunny South Carolina sounds better than South Carolina in my mind.
yeah.
But we finally made it online. We had a lot of technical difficulties. I've already started drinking. I got to ask you, what are you drinking down there?
Milwaukee's best ice.
I got Tito's on the rocks. So we are some classy guys, man. It's gonna be a classy night. While tonight we discuss what World War III could look like. And I think it's only fair we talk a little bit about some current events before we dive into World War III. Agreed?
Yeah, I want to talk, we'll get to, I think I want to talk about a few things that are unrelated to the Ukraine-Russia thing, and then briefly talk about Ukraine-Russia, and then that will very naturally lead us to World War III.
Yeah, and I feel like that's why I think it's fair to talk about World War III kind of looming, because it feels like some of this stuff is impending. We talked a few episodes ago about what a nuclear attack could look like, and that's because out of the blue, New York City on their YouTube page released a what to do in case of nuclear attack video with no context. And then most people were just like, oh, what the fuck? Are we under New York? Are we under a nuclear threat in New York City? And the mayor's like, no, we just, we thought it would be a good idea to. Either way, that was pretty scary. I felt a little weird about going back into the office, which my office is in Manhattan, for those of you who don't know. And, if I was a foreign country and I wanted to fuck up the United States, that would be kind of on my top 10 list. So a little scary.
Yeah, you know what though? Like, if New York City's gonna get nuked, chances are they're gonna go for Manhattan, and I would much rather be in Manhattan than like 10 miles out from Manhattan.
Well, luckily I live much more distance from Manhattan, so I would be safe in the house. And I would be as far as safe as concerned in Midtown Manhattan, because you either want to be really far away from a nuclear strike or right as close as possible, because then you don't have to just deal with anything.
Yeah. You just it's just a quick flash of light, and then, well, who knows? But you're not going to have to worry about it.
Well, you're going to be incinerated about as fast as the speed of light. So let's talk about current events. You got a few things on the docket today.
I got a few things I want to talk about. This one, has been making less and less sense.
Which one is this?
About it. Herschel Walker's candidacy in Georgia. So, have we talked at all about the news story that came out, I don't know, 2 weeks ago? So first of all, for context, he's come out as being against abortion.
Let's back up. For the person who doesn't know who Herschel Walker is, you want to give? I mean, just fair enough.
I guess I should give a little more background. He's a famous football player. He played for the University of Georgia and had a really good career there, and then went on to play in the NFL and had a good career in the NFL.
In the
So his
80s and 90s.
accolades, yeah, his accolades as a football player aren't really debatable. He was a good player. And so now he's running for the Senate in Georgia. And he, even before this news from like 2 weeks ago, he's been lying about all sorts of things.
No, he is
But
a politician. He is a politician.
yeah, but he's been lying in at a rate and at a magnitude far beyond politician standards. But he, the, there's a couple news stories that all kind of come together to form this, which is one, it's come out that he has like a whole bunch of kids with like different mothers that he has not spent time raising or
So
really like
a real
getting to know.
a real family man. He likes to
Right.
create families. All right, I
Yeah,
like him already.
um,
So
but
he's fathered
one
many
of his
children with multiple
one of
women.
his positions as a politician is that there should be no abortions in this country. There should be a national ban, and there should not be any exceptions. Period. Not like rape or incest or or danger to the life of the mother or anything else. Just the answer is no. You cannot get an abortion. That's
But
his stance.
so that's his current stance. But he has a history of abortion or abortions. Is this accurate?
The the story that came out was a woman saying that in 2009 he got her pregnant and paid for her abortion. And she provided the receipt from the abortion clinic, and like a signed get well card from him, and I believe a check from him for like $700.
Just all right. Let me just tell dude something.
Like,
If you're with somebody and they have an abortion, a get well soon card, maybe not the smoothest way to deal with that.
no, but it's not really a good way to deal with it regardless. However,
We haven't done a
like,
true abortion.
so my issue is not that he paid for a woman's abortion. My issue is that he has a stance
Oh wait, no,
of
wait, wasn't wait, I missed it. Was it not his? Was it he not a child that he fathered?
no, it was absolutely his kid.
Oh, okay, all right.
Because she later came out and said, not only did he pay for one of my abortions, but like I had a child with him subsequent to the abortion. So yeah, it was his kid.
Okay, but so now he's so there's a bit of hypocrisy in that. But I want to
Well,
respond to what you got to say because I don't know the
well,
guy.
first of all, like I don't have an issue that he paid for a woman's abortion. Whatever.
Okay.
Like who cares about that?
Well, I
What I have
think
an issue with
okay.
is
Go ahead.
him saying nobody should be able to have abortions when he himself has paid for someone to have an abortion. That's where the issue is.
Okay.
And
Do you have anything else?
I got two more things. One, this is three more things. One, so Newt Gingrich comes on and offers the following defense, saying, "Well, Herschel Walker played as a running back for many years. He probably had a lot of concussions. We can't necessarily expect him to remember all of these things." And I just thought, well,
This
that
is
may be true.
this is someone you want making political decisions.
Right now, what you're saying is our candidate has potentially traumatic brain injuries where he can't perform basic functions or form simple memories. This is our ideal candidate.
What
So
else you
that's
got on this guy? What else? Last thing.
hypocrisy.
Well,
So
okay, and
real quick, so my girlfriend said, "Well, wouldn't it be just as hypocritical for someone who is against abortion to later on in life say, well, now I'm pro-choice?" And my answer was no, because in one case you were taking advantage of an opportunity given to you, and now you're taking that opportunity away from somebody else, as opposed to you were taking opportunities away from people and now you are trying to give those same people opportunities. So in one case you're giving, in the other case you're taking away. And so in the case of taking away, that's a deeper form of hypocrisy.
well, and I think that's kind of actually mirrors the core argument that we're running into with abortion right now. Is it's not anti-abortion versus pro-abortion. It's anti-abortion versus pro-choice. So someone may choose to have an abortion or choose not to have an abortion, but it's having that choice. So I see where you're going. My my issue with with the word hypocrisy is we have a multi-decade difference in time. So if I said, "Hey, you know, smoking is really bad, and everybody who smokes is retarded," and then I go smoke a cigarette, that's one thing. But if I smoked cigarettes 10 years ago and now I say you shouldn't smoke, it's bad for you, that's not exactly hypocrisy. So I don't buy the hypocrisy
I
vote,
think
but
it
I
would be
do hear me.
hypocrisy if you were to say smoking should be illegal and nobody should be allowed to do it versus I would encourage you not to do it.
I don't think so. Even if you smoked 10 years ago, your opinion on something can change. What I will say is that he was afforded the luxury to be able to make that choice in the past. But also, as a man, this is how I feel about abortion. It's never really our choice.
Nope.
So, and him paying for it, and I don't care much for the guy. He does not sound like a good political candidate as far as I'm concerned. Just from what I know about him, might as well be Ric Flair running for president or running for governor somewhere. Doesn't make doesn't sound any good. But he could have paid for her abortion because that's what she was going to do, irregardless. And maybe she would have went into debt to do so. Who knows? But I wouldn't call it hypocrisy just because of the time difference. But again, when it comes down to abortion, whether you feel morally deep down to your core that abortion is wrong, you can recognize that somebody else doesn't share that opinion with you. And in recognizing that, you realize that you can't govern over them. Right. And that's just not fair at all. You want to move on from Herschel Walker?
Yes.
All right. What do you got next?
Parkland shooter, got life in prison today. And
let's because one, I don't remember anything, but two, not everybody is on top of current events like we are. So Parkland shooter was a high school shooting in Florida. I think it was Miami.
Outside of Miami, yeah.
Outside of Miami, in 2018, in which 17 died. Anything important I'm missing?
Raj, there's nothing I can do about my mic.
Move it a little closer. Move it a little closer to your mouth.
All right,
all right. So, anything else I'm missing on the Parkland shooter?
There's lots more to say about it, but you summed it up for our purposes. You summed it up.
Let me ask you. So he's getting life in prison and not the death penalty.
Correct.
All right. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm okay with it.
And why is this?
Because I'm against
because you're against the death penalty
in all cases. And here, I think about it in terms of he's going to have to spend every day for the rest of his life not being able to do anything fun and having to think about the decision that he made that day. And I think that living with regret for 40, 50, 60 years, not being able to accomplish anything, is worse than being put to death in 5 or 10 years.
No, unless he ends up developing some fans, or who the fuck knows what fanatics might be out there.
It doesn't matter.
There's a new movie about, I think, like the Columbine high school shooting. Have you heard of this?
No.
I caught a little, like maybe 20 minutes of it on Netflix the other night. I didn't watch it. But it was an interesting movie about a girl that I don't even know if it was probably based on true events. So do you know what their kind of core defense was, I think, on the defense side?
Fetal alcohol syndrome.
Fetal alcohol syndrome. So his attorney argued that because his mother was a heavy drinker while pregnant with him, supposedly he was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, which, I mean, he's kind of a funny looking dude. So, that's what fetal alcohol syndrome can do. It can impair brain function, and it can kind of give you some more pronounced, from what I understand, some more pronounced facial features and kind of bigger ears.
But I think it's like a bigger nose, bigger ears, and like something with the lip.
Yeah, but his attorney said, because he was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, He's lived a bad life and this caused him to shoot the school. But I was thinking, like, how many other people were born and are born with fetal alcohol syndrome that shoot up kids in school?
So you got to remember the job that his criminal defense attorneys had.
Well, yeah.
It's like, what defense do they really have?
Yeah, I mean,
And
you got to go with what you can.
right, and so their job is to try and represent the interests of their client as best as possible. And when you're a criminal defense attorney and you have a client that you and everybody else on the planet knows is guilty, you are still duty bound as an attorney to provide as good a defense for them as possible. And that the best defense possible might be trying to get a more lenient sentence, which in this case is life in prison instead of the death penalty.
Instead of death penalty.
And
But
so,
yeah,
like, a lot of people, I saw some posts about people hating on the on the defense attorneys, and I was just like, that's wrong. Like, someone has to be his attorney, and like, as a defense attorney, that's what you sign up to do. Is sometimes you're going to represent clients that aren't the best.
and you got to put together the best defense, and that was a shitty defense you put together.
Well, that's the best they had, and honestly, it worked. It got him life in prison instead of a death sentence.
Which I think you and I may feel similarly about. Just, in many cases, life in prison can be worse than the death penalty.
The other reason why I'm opposed to the death penalty is, like, if you give someone life in prison, you always have an out. If you made a mistake somewhere along the line, there's always something, like, you can correct for it in some way, like starting by releasing them from prison and probably paying them for the wrongful conviction and everything. If you get it wrong with someone who was sentenced to death and they're executed, and then a couple years later you find out, oh, we were wrong about this, there's no recourse.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that would be, kind of the.
And in this case, it's clear that the guy was guilty, like the guy who did it, and he was guilty. So this one's a little bit harder of a case to, like, hold up and say, like, the death penalty shouldn't exist because of this guy. No, not.
No, yeah, I feel you. Let's move on. What do you get next? I want to get into this World War III. Whether we have the content or not.
Okay, so moving on. I just saw an article in where a regiment of conscripted troops, Russian troops, shot their commander and then immediately surrendered to the Ukraine forces.
Oh, interesting. I did not hear about that at all.
So
what's the context?
Well,
and where are you going with this? Because this isn't even, James, this isn't in the notes. This is breaking news to me.
So, I mean, this is in context of the Russia-Ukraine war, and which we're going to use to bring ourselves to what World War III will look like. But yeah, so I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, Putin started the draft in Russia and conscripted like 300,000 people.
Yeah, fuck that.
This is
really
not
scary.
really a popular war among people in Russia, especially the people that are likely to be drafted.
Yeah.
So it's a sign that the war is going really poorly for Russia. And there's been reports that, like, some of these conscripts have been getting like one rifle per 2 soldiers. So, like, the soldiers are having to, like,
From Russia?
Yes.
Oh man,
Like,
that is not good.
And so, to Ukraine's credit, one of the things they've done is they have set up a surrender hotline. So there's a phone number or a website that you can go to and say, I want to surrender to the Ukraine army. So if you're a Russian soldier, like, you have a way that you can call and basically negotiate for a surrender and assume that you're going to be treated fairly, and you can find a way of saying, like, hey, I'll go over there and you guys don't shoot me and I won't shoot at you.
You got to find some, like, underground railroad kind of way out of your regiment, unless your whole regiment is surrendering. So can we get into this World War III?
So
paragraph 8 of our spreadsheet here, because I want to get there. I want to get into what World War III could look like. Obviously the current events we have going on, that that news will be dust in a week. But World War III, I feel like, could potentially be happening in a week. But
It
if
could make
not,
everything dust in a week after that.
exactly. But if not, it still feels as if tensions are building. So what I wanted to talk about in this episode with World War III is what it could look like, why it's potentially imminent, and what can we do about that? But more specifically, like what could cause it? And my first line of notes here is, what would it look like? Would it be nuclear bombs going off here and us retaliating with nuclear bombs?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but I think there's a really good chance that nuclear bombs would be sent from Russia as well. Let me ask you this. So if what Putin has said was, if the West gets involved in Ukraine any more than we currently are, and he said this, I think today, that that he will basically start World War III, nuclear warfare.
So he's been saying things along those lines since effectively the beginning of this, and he's been complaining about the West's support for Russia and like the West's intervention and whatnot again since the beginning. And I think that that's just it's weird to say entitled, but it's this entitled perspective that we can invade a country and expect nobody to stand up for them.
Yes, yeah, I'll buy that entitlement, and it's entitlement by, if you're in the fifth grade and you're 5'8", which is not tall by adult standards, but it's tall by fifth grade standards.
Yep.
You can be a bully.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, what would you call that, entitlement if you are the bully?
I think
Because I don't think it would be entitlement.
I think it would be if the bully is picking on somebody, and all of a sudden, like, the kid that's being picked on stands up for himself and takes a swing, and then two or three other people see the opportunity to beat up the bully because they themselves have been bullied as well, and now the bully finds that he's fighting, like, he might have been able to win the fight one-on-one, but he's going to have a really hard time fighting off three or four others.
Well, that's like
and the
what's
bully
potentially
getting
happening.
mad that the others jumped in to help the one kid that he was picking on. It's like, no, that's not how it works. You were the bully, and you're now suffering consequences.
Well, I think that's, but again, I don't see the entitlement there, but
It's
I do see
entitled
that
to
as
think that nobody's going to step to someone else's defense.
okay, yeah, fair enough. But okay, I'll give you that. But I do think that is a really good parallel of exactly what's happening right now, with Russia thinking they can do what they want just because they're big, and this is a small nearby country that just doesn't have the manpower or the technology, and they have a lot of lunch money, right? Because they have a lot of minerals and a lot of just raw goods that Russia wants. But so look, so if we go to aid Ukraine in their defense, and then he's in response to that, he hits the US or one of our allies or some of our infrastructure, who knows what, with a nuclear weapon, who started it?
Russia.
Would it be us, because he kind of put that threat out there?
No.
Because it was their business, it was Ukraine and Russia, and then we were the one that kind of, he said, hey, don't mess with me, and then we decided we wanted to pick a fight between two strangers because Ukraine's not part of NATO.
Yeah, but they have wanted to be, and recent events have made it very clear that they were justified. No, it's still Russia, because again, it comes back to this entitlement thing of, they were the ones who invaded, and they told everybody, we don't want you interfering, and we can basically say, okay, yeah, you and what army? Oh, that Russian army that can't even supply its own front lines? Okay, cool. Yeah, we're going to continue helping Ukraine. What are you going to do about it?
Well, and but I'm very curious where that escalates. Raj just asked what I just drank. I don't know if you saw
More
that,
vodka?
No, I had I figured because I drink really fast, so I got this vodka over here. I thought I'd supplement with some of this zero alcohol gin. I've drinking it on the podcast before, but honestly, it's really bad. This is what like fake meat was in the 90s.
Yeah.
To me, this is like fake gin to gin is just as bad. And
Well, and
unfortunately,
drinking
it's just,
straight gin isn't really a pleasant experience to begin with.
I like gin, but I'm actually going to be
No,
adding
I like gin
I'm going to
too,
be
but I
adding
don't.
vodka to this fake gin.
When I drink gin, it's always mixed with something because gin adds a lot to a lot of different drinks, but gin as a standalone spirit is not great.
Well,
And I
I'm
will
gonna
say the same thing about vodka.
well, I'll
Vodka
tell
as
you,
a standalone spirit is terrible.
I don't mind it, but I do mind really bad gin. So I'm adding vodka to my fake gin. So I'm
So
hoping.
now it's more like real gin.
um.
Okay, so
So let's back up a little bit. I want to talk about what because I think I heard there was we had a pipeline explosion sometime last week or something like that. Did you hear about this news?
yeah. There's the Nord Stream pipeline which runs underneath the Mediterranean or the Black Sea, and like it's still questionable as to who is the one who like bombed it because it was like it's been pretty much determined that it was explosions that caused the pipeline to rupture underwater. So the question is who did it? And I think the West is claiming Russia did it and Russia is claiming the West did it. And I honestly don't know who
Uh,
would choose to do it.
I mean, that's the thing is I feel like Russia is they could have done more damage if they wanted to do damage, and then they would have raised their hand. This wasn't that much damage, but maybe they're going to play this weird game where they just kind of poke us, or tap you on the shoulder from behind you, and then move out of the way as you look over your shoulder type thing.
Well, they've kind of been doing that for the last 2 decades.
I feel like that as well, and that's even when it comes to the elections, the 2016 election. So I have
You can look
kind
at
of
like what they were doing in Georgia, where they were trying like what they would do is they had like there was the border line and like a border fence with Georgia, and so what they would do is every night they would just like pick up the border fence and move it a couple feet, and they would just do this every single night of just taking a little bit more land every single night and be like, no, this is just where the border was. Seriously, you can look this up. And they
it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me, but that's just how fucking corrupt Russia is.
well, and just thinking like we can do these little things because we know that like people don't really want to start like a huge fight with us over like something small like this. And you can look at what happened in Crimea in 2014 or 2015, where they just took like a huge part of Ukraine, and much to the international community's detriment, nobody really did anything about it.
Well, and that's how they get away with stuff. So let's talk about what World War III could look like, because I've kind of broken it down into 5 different things. I think it might look like.
Number one, more drones.
Oh well, that's I would think more drones would be kind of still in the line of traditional warfare, right? Where you're exchanging fire, where you're sending machines, whether manned or not, with firepower to do damage.
Manned versus not manned is a big difference, though.
Well, okay, so we'll let that as 6. So number 1, I should probably reorder them, but number 1 would be nuclear. Well, we'll figure out which ones we want to talk about. I'm going to name them all. So you got cyber warfare, which is like hacking and things like that. You got chemical warfare, and then you have nuclear warfare. Then you have there's a better word for this, virus warfare, biological warfare, and then outer space, like fucking with satellites and things like that. And then we can add actual more traditional warfare, which obviously back in the 1700s, where you would have lines of soldiers, kind of flanked, just firing at each other. And then, 100 years later, you have kind of more tactical warfare. And then you have World War I and World War II, which obviously were different. And now you have drones and more machines.
Talking about like the way that war was done in like the 1700s, because like where like like this is something that I've thought about from time to time. Like the British Army versus the American Revolutionists, where like the British Army were wearing the bright red uniforms that had the crossing white stripes with like basically an X right in the middle of their chest as
The
if they
aim
were
here.
painting a target. But
Aim here.
but the thing is that worked for them because for the longest time, like whatever country they were fighting did the same shit. And so I have to think that like if you're one of the soldiers that's going to be on that front line where you're going to be like shooting first and also being shot at first and you're like,
Yeah.
wait, like we can see them already, why don't we just shoot now? Hey guys, like there's probably a better way to do this. And like the commander said like the chief strategist saying you're paid to shoot, not to think. Like,
But you're like first in line to
yeah, but
be
you're just
shot.
thinking like this is a fucking stupid way to commit war, man. Like,
Well, that was the thing about going to war back in the day, is it was a death sentence. And just think about the bullets that they were exchanging. They were like molded lead, right? Like
well, and they were also ridiculously inaccurate.
that is true too. So you just continue to march towards each other, shooting at each other until it just ends up in like effectively a knife fight.
Well, yeah, but it's just you just think if you're a soldier, you're like, why the fuck are we doing it this way? Like what?
I don't know. I'm sure it stems from tradition, which you and we've talked about tradition, I think, in the last episode or two, actually. So, but that's more traditional warfare, and that's when I say you start getting drones and stuff, you're still, you could. I would say if you bring cyber warfare and AI and drones together, that would be some serious 21st century type.
Well, they're already working on all that kind of stuff, but with the drones are a really big thing because one of the hardest things in battle is being able to get a good picture of what is going on in the battle in real time.
Without being
Like,
there physically.
well, no, I'm talking about while you're there physically, even if you're like on the front lines and like there's a battle going on, knowing who is where and what they're doing, and even like who you should be shooting at and who you shouldn't be shooting at is a lot more difficult than you would think.
Well, but also with drones, you can equip drones with night vision and infrared,
Well, so drones serve two really big roles. The first is recon, where you can just have at the field level a handheld drone that you can just throw up into the air and be able to fly around and see where people are. And that type of information to be able to get in real time accurately and instantly was virtually impossible. So that's a huge advantage if you can even just know where the enemy, what cover the enemy.
Well, I mean,
is
just think
hiding
about that.
in.
Like you go back 70, 80 years where there was trench style warfare, people were hiding in trenches. That just eliminates that as even a possibility, right? We know where all the trenches are. We can see the full topography of.
Well, yeah, the problem with that is even though you knew where the enemy was, like getting to the enemy was a problem.
Yeah, well, but you can equip now these drones with weapons.
So that's the second part. So like drones do the recon, but drones can also be weapons platforms in and of themselves. And there's tons of videos of like the Ukrainians using drones of like various sizes, from small drones to like drop grenades on Russian positions to big drones dropping bombs on tanks and like blowing up tanks. And the nice thing about drones is that they're relatively inexpensive and they're completely expendable.
I mean, yeah, I'll buy that. So, can we talk about chemical warfare real quick? Because I actually I didn't think about this when we were preparing for this episode, but when it comes to chemical warfare, I just listened to a Radiolab episode. I'm trying to find the name of the freaking episode, but I'm not having any luck right now. So the Radiolab episode was they created this kind of smart technology to invent new drugs and new chemicals effectively, because that's what drugs are, that would help they kind of know what molecules do what when it comes to drugs. So they
Okay.
invented this thing to create new molecules and new chemicals and kind of predict what it would do for the greater good, to eliminate cancer and to eliminate different viruses and things like that. And it was a really great technology. And then just one night they were having this conversation in the lab, and they're like, what if we kind of flip the switch here and asked it to invent chemicals that were deadly? And they thought about it for a little while. They tweaked a little bit of code, and then they hit the on switch and came back the next day, and there was something like 40,000 super deadly chemicals that were way deadlier than like anthrax or any of the stuff you hear the spies in Russia and
Anthrax is biological.
and China using. And they're talking about, like, one piece of this the size of a grain of salt could kill you in seconds. So I mean, to me, the idea that this information could potentially be out there is actually really
It's
freaky.
not potentially out there.
Well, I'm sure some of it is out there, but the U.S. government tried to buy this list from them, and they decided not to sell it to the U.S. government. So that was an interesting aspect of that.
I don't see chemical warfare as being a high likelihood with a World War III scenario.
Well, I mean, look at coronavirus. If you have a country like China, which is, at this point, we decided coronavirus isn't really that deadly, but there are more deadly viruses, and China is much more willing to shut down and much better at it than we are.
So that's not chemical warfare, though.
Now I'm talking about virus or biological.
Right, but like, let's stick on the chemical warfare because I don't see it as a high likelihood.
Me neither. That's sort of why I left it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were like trying to make an argument as to why it would be likely, but now you've moved on to biological warfare, which I see as slightly more likely, but ever so slightly. I don't really think, because the problem is if you introduce a biological agent, if, like, let's say we wanted to create a new coronavirus and send it to China if we were at war with China. Well, that would work in the short term, yes.
But getting back to us would be very easy. That's why I think it would be a place like China that would send it our way.
I think that it's a two-way risk. So if China were to try and do something like that to us, the exact same problem exists, where they introduce it into our country. Sure, we get the worst of it, but it will spread, and it'll spread around the world, and it'll eventually get back to them. It's like if you live in a house and you hate your roommate, so you decide you're going to pour gasoline in their room and light their room on fire, and you decide you're going to lock the front door so that way nobody can get out of the apartment. Well,
the apartment representing Earth.
Right, but if you it's
going to spread. It's going to spread.
Right, your roommate's going to get the worst of it, but you're still stuck in a burning apartment building.
So, but yeah, fair enough. And then you know that Will Smith movie I Am Legend, where there's zombies or something.
The book was better.
Okay, fine, but point being is that you have one person in that case who was immune to whatever virus there was, and that being Will Smith. I think it would cripple the population down to, it would basically bring us back like 15,000 years, 20,000 years, maybe, in terms of global population.
Maybe, but the problem is it's not going to do it to just the country that you're at war with.
Exactly, which is pretty wild. What's next?
Nuclear. I don't think that it's a high likelihood, because I was reading an article about U.S. foreign policy and our proposed responses in a scenario in which Russia uses nuclear weapons.
Okay.
And the article was talking about how the likelihood that the United States gets directly involved in the Ukraine war goes from what's effectively zero right now, where, like, yes, we're sending weapons to them, but we don't have any troops. We don't have anybody like actually firing rounds in Ukraine. The most that we're doing for Ukraine is we're giving them a whole bunch of nice weapons and we're providing them with intelligence, like
Hmm.
satellite images and all that kind of stuff. But so I'm gonna like that's basically zero involvement from us directly. If Russia uses nukes in Ukraine or somewhere else, we will get directly involved. Not only will we get directly involved, a lot of other countries will too.
And well, in
But
what way? In what? Well, let me ask you. Do you remember the title of the article or where it was?
it was on Slate.com. I can see if I can find it.
Okay, so
But
Slate. We don't need it. I'm just Slate.com article just to attribute Slate, and then how would the rest of the world get involved?
well, basically, it would be the rest of the world, primarily NATO members, saying like, okay, we're going to shut down all of Russia's capabilities, but we would not use nukes. We would use conventional bombs. And one, to be able to
So you're thinking
maintain the
that we
moral
would
high ground.
you thinking that we would respond with conventional bombs. So
Hmm.
they're going to bomb Ukraine or somewhere else. Then we're going to respond with conventional bombs.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
And
And then
you
they're
would
going to
probably
respond what with muskets?
no.
It's
I
like
think
where
the
why are the
no
downgrade
the
doesn't
the
make sense.
idea is that if Russia uses a nuke, we respond quickly with all sorts of conventional weapons and just take out as much of their command infrastructure, so that way they're not able to launch any more nukes
So yeah,
or
I was thinking about that, and in theory that makes sense. Like you're afraid that push comes to shove, shove comes to punch, punch comes to fist fight turns to brawl, turns to bar fight, turns to
turns
the
to
bar
knife fight.
yeah, turns to the bar burning down, right? But so I buy that. So they hit some us or somewhere else with a nuke, we hit them with a bomb, then we just come to peace terms effectively. I don't, but
I'm
we
not
would
saying we would come to
no,
peace. I'm saying that
but
like
we knock them out. We, with our exacted precision, take out their communication channels and their satellites and their different infrastructure, electricity, water. Um, I don't I don't think that we have that level of precision. And I think that our history in the Middle East would show you that. I mean, to a degree, we just aren't as exacted as we would like to be. So I think the likeliness of that happening is
well, I would disagree because like if you look at the first couple weeks of the war in Iraq, we basically took out all of their high level military capabilities almost immediately. What they were left with was a a ground army. They didn't have much of it. Like they didn't really have a navy to begin with, and what air force they did have was completely disabled within the first week. So they were left with a ground-based army, virtually no air defenses, and probably significantly hobbled communication infrastructure. And so the reason why the war in Iraq went poorly long term was not because of our inability to hit precise targets of strategic importance. It was because of the way that we expected things to happen versus the way that they actually happened, and the difficulty of being an occupying force with boots on the ground, fighting an insurgency and fighting a populace that doesn't really want you there. So when it like the resistance in Iraq was more of sandpaper as opposed to a knife, where it just slowly wore us down, but never inflicted
yeah.
like
I,
major wounds.
I follow you there. I just don't think that we are as exacted when it comes to. I mean, you're saying we did in Iraq. Russia's a much bigger place, and
It's
you know,
bigger by land, but if you want to talk about like where all the important things are, like you might have you're going to have probably like missile silos in Siberia or something. But if you can cut off the way that they're communicated to, then they're not going to be able to do much. Ilani Carvajal says, I hope you're right because I've been reading about underwater nuclear weapons being tested by North Korea right now and the undetectable, uninterceptable missiles by Russia. So the whole thing is we need to get ahead. Like underwater nuclear weapons aren't really that big of a problem. Like sure, if you're in the area, it's going to be annoying, but like they're not as bad
It's
as
gonna be
like.
annoying. Well, I mean, so it's the whole Japan thing that they did during World War II, where Japan had all these submarines that were going to just appear around the United States, around our big cities in the U.S. and bomb the cities, and they were going to be so undetected until the last very moment. But for whatever reason, that didn't end up going off. We talked about that in the previous episode, I think.
Yeah, but also Japan didn't have nukes. Really,
Well,
only we
okay.
did.
So let's see.
But
Let me ask you a question. So where do you think Russia would? So Russia's going to be the first one to throw a nuclear bomb. Where do you think that would hit?
somewhere in eastern Ukraine.
But why would they bomb Ukraine? You think so? If the U.S. got involved or some other European countries got involved in response to that, they would bomb Ukraine.
No, I'm saying actually yes, I am saying that.
I mean, I could see
Because
that as a possibility. I
what
think that
what
rather
Russia's
than
going to
bomb,
try and do is has been trying to posture as they are in the right here. And so in order for them to maintain that narrative among the few allies that they have left, they can't bomb anywhere but Ukraine. Now, if we were to try, if we or NATO were to bomb targets within Russia, then they might expand and say, okay, fine, we can throw nukes other places. But
well, I think Russia is willing to bomb many other countries. Russia is such a big place with a lot of nothingness. Russia's going to throw their bombs at cities, I imagine first, and we're going to throw bombs at places distant to Siberia.
well,
That's how we work. Like you're saying, they're going to throw nukes, we're going to throw bombs, right? So that's why I think the question on the shared doc I have is, does Putin fear death?
the answer to that
And
is no.
I don't. I think to a degree he does, but does he value legacy above that?
Well,
And
that's
what
why
does he
he's
think
doing
it?
this.
And what does he think his legacy is? Is that to reassemble the USSR?
Yeah, that very much is the case. Where, like, when he was starting off his career, he was high up in the KGB when the USSR was kind of in its waning years, but he remembers that time fondly and wants to go back to it. And so the whole invading Ukraine thing is part of his twisted notion of what the USSR should be and what Russia should be. And so he's doing this for his legacy, which is why he doesn't seem to care at all about any of the consequences that have happened in the last 10
Well,
months.
that's is what it seems like. But it also looks like, just like with a lot of bullies, they're picking on the smaller people because they think they're that much stronger. When in reality, I'll tell you one thing about bullies: they don't go to the gym. Right. And
So
I think
what
he really
Raj says,
overestimates their nuclear abilities, even though nuclear ability in any way, shape, or form is vastly deadly. But I think he overestimates their technology and their force to.
well, so yeah, you've been seeing that really from day one, which is the estimated capabilities of the Russian army were nowhere near what the actual capabilities were because Russia has such a deep problem with corruption that all the money that they were throwing at the military, a good portion of that was just being skimmed. And so when they said that they were putting money towards like retrofitting armor or buying new things or whatever, a lot of times those contracts are like, yeah, we're going to buy like we're supposed to build 5 tanks, like we'll take 4 tanks that were broken down out back, repaint them, buy one new tank, and then everybody gets to go on like vacation somewhere.
I mean, that's how a lot of countries like that work.
Right, but which isn't a problem until you actually need to use all 5 of those tanks.
So I want to talk about two more things. I want to throw that Einstein quote in there. One, I want to talk about the other potential type of world war that could happen, and I want to talk about how a world war with Russia lobbing the first nuke could play out on a world scale. But first, I want to mention I heard it attributed. I read it in a bunch of different places, attributed to Albert Einstein, but in many cases it was. I believe this is an Albert Einstein quote, so it beats me. But the quote was, "I don't know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones."
Well, regardless of whether it was Einstein who said it or not, I agree.
Yeah, well, I mean, if World War III is as catastrophic as it could be, right now I feel like we have this, the Cold War could have been World War III. And I think that people think we are centuries away from another world war, or at least decades. But then I was thinking like World War I and then World War II were not that far apart.
30 years.
And things,
Less than 30 years.
Less than 30 years, things speed up, right? Like in time, things start to happen faster and faster, just in the sense that, with technology, information accelerates and travels at a faster speed. So the world would be much more likely, news travels a lot faster to erupt into world war.
Yeah, but
and recruit other countries than it happened back then. It wouldn't take 9 months to get 7 countries involved. It could take
9 minutes.
It could take 9 minutes or 9 days, right?
But I don't see. I think that there are a lot more forces working against a World War III right now, because so many countries have a negative incentive for engaging in whatever shape World War III takes. There's a ton of countries that want no part of it.
Well, but
Because
there's also a
think
lot of
about, like,
countries
how
that
much
don't
of
have much
how
to lose. There are a lot of countries that don't have much to lose. Like, I was thinking about,
what countries don't have much to lose.
well, the OPEC.
Russia's one of them, but that's it.
Yeah, kind of the OPEC region, for example, as we graduate into electric power and away from oil power, those guys are going to lose their footing quite a bit.
You're already seeing economic pivots from, like, the big oil producing countries. So
Sure, but we will be much less dependent on them as a world in a decade or 2
here's the thing.
decades.
If I'm an oil producing country, and, like, World War III is not good for me. Why? Because if World War III really runs its course, there's not going to be a whole bunch of demand for oil.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it could really stunt electric vehicle.
I'm saying there's not going to be a lot of demand for electric vehicles either. There's not going to be that many people left.
Well, I mean,
you're not going to have
it's catastrophe on the world scale, like we're thinking it maybe could.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that, like, if you're an oil producing country, say you're Qatar, you don't want World War III. Like, you'll make some money in the short term by selling oil to all the countries that need to power their ships and stuff. But at the end of the day, at the end of the war, you're going to have a lot less customers.
Well, I'm thinking that they want a longer duration of the world being dependent on oil. And
well, then they can do that in a much simpler way.
Well, maybe.
Here's how you do it: cut production.
Well, and that's what they're doing.
And you don't start any wars over that. People will get pissed that their gas costs more. But if you want to just extend the life of people being dependent on oil, cut production and drive prices up, and that, like, in some ways that'll incentivize people moving away from, like, fossil fuels entirely. But at the same time, you know that you only have so much oil in the ground beneath your nation. So the faster you sell it, the faster you run out. So cut production. Like, what countries out there really have nothing to lose? You got North Korea and you got Russia. Who else?
Well, let me ask you a question. When that first bomb gets lobbed, that first nuclear bomb gets lobbed by Russia, who's the first country to bomb Russia in retaliation with a nuclear weapon?
I don't think anyone uses a nuke.
I think that it would be very highly probable that would happen, that a nuclear weapon would head towards Russia. But
Well, if it's gonna be, if there's a
But
nuke
look, the thing is, I'm
being
thinking,
shot towards Russia, it's gonna have an American flag painted on it.
but I have a thought that in the uh Eastern Europe and Russia, if that area is in conflict, it's bad for Western Europe and any of the countries around Russia. So I feel like the majority of the European Union is going to want to band together against Russia, right?
They already pretty
And
much
then
have.
and they already have. Yeah, fair enough. And then you have who else is with them? The US, Canada, um, Australia, who else is
New
going to fall?
Zealand,
New Zealand.
like a whole bunch of like Western first world.
Okay, now but China probably not, right? China probably not. Maybe not even
China wants to
Japan.
stay out of this entirely.
They do. Yeah, they do. But maybe Japan would be in our camp.
Japan's absolutely in our camp because Japan depends on us for protection, specifically from China.
Most
And so
specifically
Japan's
from
gonna
China.
do
But look, China is they're on top of China, right? So we can only protect them so much. But are we then going to be fighting Russia on one side and China on the other side? It's not. So
Well, the thing
we
is,
may
like,
lose Japan.
if Russia decides to shoot nukes, it's like China's going to try and stay out of this entirely, because if China can just sit back and let the West versus Russia happen, then China's going to be in a really good position to, one,
Be the
have their
number one
military
superpower.
emerge unscathed.
Yeah.
Two, they can produce a whole bunch of shit for both sides. Three, once Russia loses, which they will, that's going to be an opportunity for Chinese companies that are geographically close to just move in and take over a whole bunch of cheap assets.
So let me ask you this. What about Africa and India?
India's playing a similar role to China, and Africa is probably saying, we've got our own problems, man.
I think there's very little involvement from both of those countries.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and they're isolated enough. But then you look at like Australia. But I just think India is being part of Asia is going to really be keeping their cards close to their chest.
Australia and India, despite both being former British colonies, have very little in common.
But what I'm saying is they're not part of the fight. But
Australia would be part of the fight.
Australia would be on our side. India would not be on our side. That's why I say keeping their cards close to their chest.
India's going to play the same game that China does, which is, we want to stay out of this, keep our army and our manufacturing sectors intact, make a little bit of money on this on the side if we can, and then swoop in and kind of pick whatever carrion we can from Russia. And if we can get some cheap formerly state-owned assets that are now an Indian company or a Chinese company, then we just came out on top and we didn't have to do anything.
I think we just got dropped off of Zoom, which is not good. Oh no.
We probably we're right around an hour now.
Yeah. Well,
we should say hi to Todd Vaught if he's still listening to us.
All right. Well, look, I still got Zoom open on my computer. Last thing that I want to add is, and we could really expand on this quite a bit, but my thought that it may not be country against country. Okay. It could be ideology against ideology within countries. And that war could be perpetuated within different countries, sown by misinformation or meddling with elections. And
well, real quick,
on a worldwide scale.
April Alvarez says China's been flooding money into Africa preparing for this. Well, that's true. They're not really preparing for World War III. What China's been doing has been using like government level loans to be able to get economic footholds in Africa, and kind of gambling on the premise that even if those loans aren't repaid, the clauses in those loans lead to them being able to take over valuable areas in infrastructure and trade and be able to just kind of they're basically buying their way into Africa via loans and playing a long-term economic strategy there. I don't think it's really militarily focused.
We're at time. So I'd love to talk more about world war within nations, but we got about 10 seconds left. So this is the final episode, season 3. Thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Adios.
Cheers.
All right. This is the final end of the final episode of season 3. We'll see you guys next season. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube so you catch season 4. We'll see you then.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.